I made a quick video recently on a few ways to reconnect with your body when you are completely in your head. In these scenarios, your body leaves first. That's the part that I want to focus on today. And that's the type of scenarios where people that are not in their head and not undergoing as much stress will tell you to just take a deep breath and just go for it. This tool is important, but there's a whole other set of options that you can reach for. So I wanted to do a very practical, very simple episode today where I want to share 5 things that I actually do when I need to come back to my body. These are some of the techniques that work for me in real life when I'm in stressful situation or I feel very disconnected from my body. You're listening to The Bold Beginner, a space for multifaceted women where we explore how to feel at ease in your body when you're being seen. If something here speaks to you, consider subscribing or leaving a review or a comment. It genuinely supports the growth of this space. Okay, so the times that this type of situations hit me the hardest, it's usually almost always something related to exposure, where I feel exposed, when I'm surrounded by other people, when I am being seen, when I'm in public. And obviously I'm taking this example because I think it can speak to you as well. In my personal experience, I have been, for instance, pitching my past business to investors. That's been a big cause of stress for me. So all of this plays a big part in your brain in feeling very stressed out. And that quite often leads you, at least it led me, to feeling very disconnected from my body. And so if I take the example of the pitching, and I think that's very true for most public speaking situations, usually you start feeling this disconnection from your body and this tension in your body right before you walk into the room. For me, the stress pairs with definitely a shorter breath. This is something that I can feel physically when I speak. I think a lot of people can't see it. I have heard many times that I look confident, but I can tell that my sentences are my voice starts shaking at the end of many sentences because of how shorter my breath gets. My shoulders and my back are very intense. I usually feel it very strongly after such an event, and I get home. I will usually release finally my shoulders and my back and feel the pain that I can't even feel when I'm going through the motion because I'm numbing my reactions, or like I'm just ignoring what my body is feeling. And like I said before, my brain in these situations definitely goes 500 miles an hour. And I just can't seem to be able to slow it down. The way I palliate to this is often by preparing insanely. So there's been many instances where people thought I was extremely confident and comfortable pitching my business. That's because I had been rehearsing so many times that I left no room for mistakes, or I left no room for stuttering or this type of things. Obviously, the scenarios that I've just mentioned are quite high stakes, whether it is pitching, whether it is a meeting for work or presentation for work. But there are so many situations where you can feel like that, maybe in a less visible way, or maybe you feel it a bit less, but it definitely took me much longer to figure this out. But it's not just for the big stuff. And I'll give you the most silly example because I think it's very telling, but I live near the water these days. And so I do quite often, or I used to do quite often, beach walks at sunset. And so I'd go for this sunset walk, which you should be picturing as the most calming thing that you could possibly do. But if the beach is crowded, if there's a lot of people around me, by the time I'm halfway down the beach, I am completely up in my head again. And it almost feels like, if I'm trying to put words on it, like I'm almost performing being a person who's enjoying her walk. And I'm not, in fact, actually being a person who's enjoying her walk. And I took this example because obviously, first of all, it sounds very silly, but also because if I go on a day where the beach is not crowded, I don't feel this nearly as much. So that's just very true for any time that I'm just walking through a busy area, a packed street, a market, whatever it is. Usually when I get back to my safe space, so when I get back home, let's say, I'm realizing quite often that I've been holding my breath basically the whole time. So it's almost like I'm floating above myself the entire walk. I'm not actually being present. It's almost like I see myself from above. It is quite telling, right? It means something pretty important. It definitely provides a lot of information. And that is that anything that puts me in front of other people, even if it's passively, even if they're not looking at me, because for sure no one's looking at me when I'm just enjoying my beach walk, my system, my nervous system, reads that as exposure. And when it reads being in public as exposure, it means putting into place kind of a defense mechanism, a protection mechanism that is going up into my head. And that basically means leaving the body, being out of the body. These 5 things that I'm going to share, those 5 methods, let's call it. I just want to say that there are things that I'm actively working on, like right now. I don't have it all figured out. I'm definitely still in the journey, but I think that's why it's so important to share it, because these are things that are working for me now, when I'm maybe just a few steps ahead of some people listening to me. And so that's why I want to share this with you now, because I know what it feels like to feel completely disconnected. I know the struggle that it is to be back into the body. I know the struggle that it is to be constantly in the head. And this is a journey that I'm working through now. And these things that I'm going to share have definitely had an impact, a long-term impact. So I want to share them because if it can actually move the needle for some other people, then I'm happy with that. Another very important thing that I want to share before jumping into it is how much I've been thinking for years that coming back to your body was this big thing, almost spiritual, and I'm not a very spiritual person. An hour-long yoga, deep meditations, this type of things. And it really isn't. It can be, of course, and this stuff is great. But back to the situations that I mentioned before, if you are in the middle of a meeting at work or a presentation, you're about to have a presentation or you're about to pitch your business or whatever, you can't afford an hour. You just have a few seconds. So you need something that actually works, kind of an emergency kit for these situations. So these 5 things I'm going to share, each of them is actually targeting something different. And that's the whole key, because when someone tells you, hey, just take a deep breath and go, that's one tool. And it's an important one. I'm actually going to share something about this, but it targets one part of what's happening. All right, but first, let me back up a second to explain what I actually mean when I say that your body leaves, because it might sound a bit abstract to some people. And because precisely I'm someone who's very much in her head, like I'm sure most people that I'm speaking to, I usually want to understand what's going on. So when you're stressed, when you're very stressed, there's a bunch of things that happen at once. And I mentioned some of the symptoms. It can be the shallow breathing. It can be the muscles tensing up. A lot happens in the jaw. I'll get back to it later. The shoulders, the lower belly. And then a lot of your attention climbs up directly into your head. So usually, and I hope you can relate, you stop being able to feel, whether it's your hands, your feet, as clearly. And your sense of where you are, like physically in the space, it starts getting fuzzy. So that's not one thing happening. That's like 5 things happening at the same time. 5 things happening, 5 things that you can do to reconnect to your body. Stephen Porges, that I brought up in past episodes, he's a neuroscientist and he came up with something called the polyvagal theory. And the basic idea is that your nervous system has different states. So if your body is gone into freezing, for instance, if you just freeze on stage, it will not require the same intervention as if your body is into fight mode, for instance. These states, they look different, they feel different, and therefore they need different methods to get out of. And so that's why our quote-unquote stress management, let's call it that way, is usually actually happening in the wrong place. Because we're trying to think our way out of something that isn't in our thoughts anymore. It's in the muscle, it's in the breath, it's in the shoulders, everything I mentioned. But enough with the theory. Let me actually jump into the 5 things that are going to help you in a tangible way, very concrete way, reconnecting with your body. The first one is my feet. And I did mention it in a short video that I made previously, but I wanted to go a bit deeper into it. So being a bit more specific, you want to press your feet into the floor hard. Like usually I actually push down, and then you can wiggle your toes, you can rock back and forth, or, kind of put weight on the side of your feet. And the reason why, and it might sound extremely simple, I like simple solutions, is that when you're up in your head, the fastest way to get back into your body is through the furthest point from your head. So in that case, that's your feet. I did mention in my past video that the ideal way to do it is when you're bare feet, because you can then get a sense of the texture or temperature of the floor, and it just helps you reconnect faster. The reason why I'm saying this is because I like to do that a lot at the beach. So usually I kind of like playing with the sand and just digging little holes with my feet, and that just helps really feel the sensation. But then again, if we talk about situations like being on stage, doing a presentation for work, that's a very different scenario, and that's still something that works really well. It still brings you back into your body. The second method is my jaw. Very simple, very concrete. I unclench my jaw and I really pay attention to my tongue and drop it off the roof of my mouth. You can also even let your mouth fall open a little bit. And that's because the jaw holds a lot, too much. And usually you don't realize it, and you don't realize that you're clenching until you aren't anymore. That's something that's very true for people that stay in their head too much. There's a psychologist called Peter Levine. He developed an approach to healing trauma that's called the somatic experiencing. And he talks about how the body stores activation in specific places. And for a lot of us, the jaw is one of the main ones. And for me, it's a big one. It always has been. So I want to be even quite transparent about how I even figured this out. And I'll explain why in a bit. But for years, I had no idea that my jaw was tense. I didn't even know it was a thing. I just thought that's how a jaw feels like. It's the only jaw that I've ever had. So how would I know that it was tight and that it's not meant to feel like that? But where I live now, I get face massages pretty regularly. And when I do, the woman who does the massage, she usually gets right into the jaw muscles and she really gently pulls the muscle and presses into them. And the first time a masseuse did that, I was like, oh my God, this is what the muscles in my jaw feel like. And it's been like this whole time, and I had no clue because I was completely disconnected from it. So I'd been carrying that tension for so long, it had become invisible to me, like it was my baseline. And so that's why I want to share this, because sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you can't find the tension on your own because you don't know that you don't know. So you may need someone to show you where it is. The third technique is my exhale, and specifically, I want to pair it with belly breathing. So here we go. Now we're talking about the take a breath, and that's still a very important one, like I said. But again, it is a big one for me because when you're in a stress state and someone tells you to breathe deeply, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, it's been extremely true. I would definitely take chest breathing. Usually what it does is that it actually ramps you up more, because usually the chest breathing is the kind of breathing that your body does when it's preparing to fight or to run. It's like a survival mode type of breathing. So you're basically inhaling stress on top of stress. Belly breathing, however, is the opposite. To do it, you have to let your belly soften. You let it actually expand on the inhale. It's almost like filling up a balloon down in the belly. And then on the exhale, you let it fall. And very importantly, you make the exhale longer than the inhale. And you make it slow, because that long, slow exhale, that's the actual signal to your nervous system that you're safe, that you don't have to be in a survival mode. And I'm sure that's a type of breathing that for the most part you've been doing only at like yoga classes or whatever class. Sometimes you can do a Pilates class or stretching class or whatever, and they will always take this little time at the end to really ask you to take deep breaths through the belly, and that brings this deep sense of relaxation. There's a reason for it. That's why it's important to also do it outside of these classes. Speaking of me still being in the journey, by the way, it's this belly deep breathing and longer exhale is one that I've been struggling with quite a bit for some time, because my default is definitely chest breathing. A lot of the time I actually have to actively put a hand on my belly and to pay attention to how my belly is inflating as I inhale. So I'm still paying attention to it, to be very conscious, to put consciousness to it, even years in the process. Okay, the fourth technique is to orient. And what I mean is that actually I try to look around wherever I am, whether it's in the room, at the beach for the sunset walk, anytime that I feel like in this space where I get up to my head, in my head, I try to look at things and even name things. If you're alone, if you're at home, you can do it out loud, or it's completely fine to do it in your head really, but try to name things around you. There's a window here. There's a wave coming. There's my coffee cup here. And even though it may sound silly, it really isn't, because when your nervous system is activated, you usually lose your sense of where you are. So when you orient, you tell your body that you are here right now and you're in a safe situation. Again, this one is quite important to me. All of them are actually quite important to me, but this is something that I would hope that you can relate to. But I've noticed more and more the past few years how I've been struggling to notice what's around me. I'm not very observant at all. So I first noticed that where I live, most people ride a scooter. And this is something I've been noticing with a lot of people in my circle telling me like, oh, did you notice that shop 2 streets away, or on your way here, did you see what happened on the side of the road, or these type of comments. And most of the time I'm completely ignorant of it. I just completely missed it. Initially, I put that on the fact that it's a pretty good thing, right? I'm focused when I drive, therefore I focus on the important things and I just completely ignore things that don't matter for my safety or for the safety of people around me. But I started noticing this element in many other contexts where even when I'd be walking and I would get to a place and a friend would tell me, did you notice that thing on your way here? And I'd be like, no, because I'm so much in my head that I actually completely ignore and stop seeing what's around me, stop noticing what's around me. So this technique of orienting yourself is really helpful for that, to help you ground yourself in the moment and start noticing what's around you and really anchor yourself. And the fifth and last is something that's very simple to do, and that's just bringing a bit of consciousness in your body. It's basically to just put a hand either on your belly, is probably a bit less visible, again, if you're in a meeting room, or on your chest, just to have this grounding, warm contact with yourself. Because the nervous system actually needs to feel held. And sometimes I think we tend to forget that we can hold ourselves. And it's a real physical thing that your body responds to. Here you go. That's the 5. The feet, jaw, exhale, orient, and touch. And the whole thing, even if you decide to do all of them, takes about a minute, sometimes even less. And the last thing, because I'm pretty sure that somebody's going to ask, but what do you do when none of it is working? When you do all 5 things, then you're still somehow stuck in your head. So the first thing, my first answer to that would be that you don't want to force yourself into it, because if you try to force it, it's another kind of violence. And if you're in this situation, it means that your body has had enough of that. You actually want to reassure your body, not force it into some sort of relaxed state. But the bigger thing that I want to say is that it's all about repetition and patience. And I want to say this because I've noticed something in myself and in pretty much anyone I know who's tried this type of things. We try it once, maybe twice sometimes. And if it doesn't work immediately, we go, see, I knew it. This is just a bunch of nonsense, and we just drop it, we discard it. And that's been particularly true for me because of how impatient of a person I am by nature. But then if you actually take the time to think about it for a second, the patterns that we're trying to undo here, this whole being in your head situation, they took years to settle in, decades most of the time. We learned to disconnect from our body when we were really small, and we've been doing it basically for our entire lives. We're really wired that way. It's deep in us. And it's basically the most familiar thing about us. And we expected to undo it in like 3 minutes with a couple of exhales. It's just wild when you think about it. And I think why that's been in my mind for a bit lately is because we know this rationally. I'm talking about, very intellectual profile, like in your head type of women profile. We know most of the time that anything that matters takes time. We know that career goals take years. Financial goals, they take years. Building a relationship, we know that it takes years. Same with building a business. Building literally anything of substance takes years. And we accept that. And we don't get mad at ourselves when our business isn't profitable in a week or 2. We don't quit a workout program because we don't see abs after 1 session or 2, because we know. But the second that something gets somehow labeled in our head as woo-woo, all of that goes out the window. We expect it to work immediately, or we throw it away. And I think, because it's been my case for the longest, that it's because we don't actually take it seriously. We don't think that it's real work, that it has any scientific basis. We think it's soft stuff, almost the optional stuff. It's the thing that should be easy if it's even valid at all. And there's no judgment here because I've been doing it for years, literally for years. I was the worst at this, especially with flexibility that I'm working on now in a much deeper way. But I've been trying many times a bit of yoga here and there, and then I'd be like, okay, well, that didn't fix me. Then I guess it won't ever fix me. And at the time, I never extended myself the same patience that I'd extend to a project at work, for instance. Not even close. So back to the initial question that I'm anticipating. If you try the 5 things and they don't work the first time, that doesn't mean they don't work, period. That's just a sign that you're at the start of something, and you have to give it the same time and the same respect you'd give to anything else that matters. You show up again tomorrow and the next day. Because maybe a reason why it's not working is because you're that disconnected that it's going to be a long way before you even start seeing some effect of it. And that's actually something that I would suggest that you do, is that before you even jump into anything, is to try and notice, try and pay attention to what you're disconnected from without even trying to fix anything. Because sometimes you're going to try to notice and then you're going to realize that you can't. That if you try to feel into your body and there's nothing there, like you can't really realize if your jaw is being tensed up, if your shoulders are being tensed up, you don't really know how to locate what's going on, then that alone is information. It means that you're more disconnected than you knew. And that's actually very useful to find out, because that's something you did not know that you didn't know. And as I mentioned earlier, for my jaw, maybe in that case you might need some help to find out what's going on, like I did with my jaw, right? You might need someone, a massage therapist, a body worker, whoever, to gently show you where you're holding things that you didn't even know you were holding. Or sometimes that might feel like too much, or maybe, it's not affordable, or whatever the reason is. In that case, you can just put your hands on your face, you can press into your jaw gently, or whatever part of your movie, and just see what you find. And you'll probably be surprised. I definitely was. Because the truth is that you can't come back to a body that you can't feel first. Awareness is the very first step. I could have never started doing this practice trying to release my jaw if I was not aware in the first place that it was constantly tensed up. But it's really essential that you bring back that awareness, because that is the start of listening to your body. And your body's been so patient with you, it still is. It's basically more patient with you than you've been on yourself, if that makes sense. So really give it the credit that it deserves.